Hello, got a minute? We're about to unpack a list of books, some hidden gems, some, not so much. Let's find out what the hype, or the hate, is all about.
Next up, The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern. Shelley's book Nook dropped a comment that 237 people couldn't help but like. Let's see what she said. Antony and Cleopatra, by William Shakespeare. I love this author so much, her book, and Dwick Startley, were both winners for me. And The Love Elixir of Augusta Stern was just as enjoyable, if not more so. This story has two timelines, 1920s Brooklyn and 1980s Florida, so both timelines are historical fiction. There are a lot of characters in this book, and many appear in both timelines. I loved reading about Augustus's younger years, how she became who she is as a person, and how she became a pharmacist, which was very rare for women in the 1920s. This book has themes of feminism without it punching you in the face, and without Augusta losing her wit and charm. Although I enjoyed the earlier timeline, which is normal for me, I loved the style of writing in both timelines. The story captivated me and the characters charmed their way into my heart. The plot sucked me in and never let me go. I love the way the author was able to weave both timelines as well as multiple genres seamlessly. The book has a bit of mystery and magical realism. It's historical fiction with a touch of romance. But Augusta and her charms are the star of this book. It was so refreshing to have an older woman as a lead, especially one as smart as Augusta. If she were a real person, I'd love to have a coffee with her and become friends. All. The Tester. Stars. Thank you to NetGalley and the publisher for the advanced reader's copy.
We now turn to the women. Elizabeth, whose comment garnered 7,549 likes, shared the following opinion. Well, I am going to be that person. That person who does not rate the book everyone is raving about 5 stars. I just can't. And here's why. First of all, I do want to say that I very much appreciate that Kristen Hanna chose to write a novel about something other than World War II. It was refreshing to read about the Vietnam War, a war about which very few novels have been written. Furthermore, I appreciate that she focused on the women. Women's contributions and experiences in history are often overlooked, and probably more so in regards to the Vietnam War. I, for one, honestly never thought about it. Secondly, Hannah does capture the setting very vividly. There are a lot of gory war scenes. You can feel the heat of the jungle, the stress, the exhaustion, etc. Similarly, she captured the experience of PTSD well, as far as I know, not having experienced it myself. I think it's important to have this experience vividly exposed, both for the sake of empathy, as well as for those who have gone through it, to feel heard and seen. She clearly did a ton of research on PTSD, as well as on the war and the time period. So why not the raving 5 stars? Quite simply, because Kristen Hanna likes to jerk people around emotionally, and because the romance in this is obnoxiously awful. First things first, and I don't have anything else to say about this. I despise the title. Moving on. Nimes asterisk. A few spoilers ahead. Asterisk, asterisk. Emotionally, this book is seriously everything but the kitchen sink. Just throw in every tragic thing you can think of. It's there. Just when you think something good might happen, nope, the tragedy gets almost repetitive and boring. Like, how many times do I want to read about wanting her father's approval, or about how cold her mother is? How many times do I want to read about her bloody clothes, and the mud, and men's gaping wounds? How many times do I want to read about her drunken pill popping a la Valley of the Dolls? In a few cases, tragedy conveniently disposed of some plot points and characters which I found annoying. For instance, rather than Frankie having an honest conversation with another character, something traumatic occurs so she doesn't have to. Do I get that the war trauma, both during and at home, was unending? Absolutely, that's not really my issue. Kristen Hanna likes to pile on the tragedy and trauma in many of her books. It's her formula, and it gets tiresome after a while. And the romance. Ugh, don't get me started. I predicted basically what would happen every single time a love interest was introduced, and I was right. She falls in love suddenly with no real reason other than feelings like, he brought her back to life. Gag me. That's not real. especially not after a 5-minute conversation. Why do any of these men deserve to be adored? I can't see it. None of them were particularly stellar specimens. You can tell me these relationships were realistic all you want, but I'm not obligated to like these guys. Or just gloss over the repeated adultery. That continues after the war. Hannah's presentation of the romances is sentimental, cheesy, and predictable. She does this in her books a lot. And I'm sorry, but nothing will compel me to be okay with not one but 2 men coming back from the dead. This is a highly readable book, and you'll be turning the pages fast. I hope that we continue to hear more about underappreciated women in history, and this book did make me want to know more. However, I would have preferred less piled-on tragedy and fewer contrived, sentimental plot lines. Pub date, February 6, 2024.
Moving on to The Phoenix Crown. Bolt Reads shared her thoughts, and 187 people liked what she had to say. As a devoted fan of Kate Quinn's captivating historical fiction, I eagerly awaited the release of The Phoenix Crown, pre-ordering it the moment it became available. However, my anticipation swiftly turned to disillusionment as I delved into its pages. The Phoenix Crown falls short of Quinn's usual standard, lacking the depth and intrigue that characterized her previous works. The characters, typically the heart and soul of Quinn's narratives, failed to resonate with me, leaving me indifferent to their fates. Even the antagonist, a staple of Quinn's storytelling prowess, failed to elicit any genuine sense of menace or intrigue. The plot, while initially promising, quickly devolved into a tired and formulaic trope, following a predictable arc that left little room for surprise or suspense. From the disappearance of the protagonist's best friend to the inevitable showdown with the villain, each plot twist felt telegraphed in advance, robbing the story of its potential impact. Moreover, The Phoenix Crown suffers from a misguided genre classification, masquerading as historical fiction while neglecting to fully explore its historical backdrop. Instead, the narrative seems more focused on its LGBTQ themes, with the portrayal of the San Francisco earthquake relegated to a mere footnote. In conclusion, The Phoenix Crown is a disappointing departure from Kate Quinn's usual brilliance. While every author is entitled to an occasional misstep, this collaboration fails to capture the magic of Quinn's previous works. As a longtime fan, I can only hope for a return to form in Quinn's future endeavors.
Curious about the bullet swallower? Let's hear from Kimberly. Her opinion earned 73 likes for a reason. Publication date, January 2024. What a magical, riveting, put you in a daze story. After finishing reading, I am still dwelling dreamily in a landscape switching back and forth from Texas to Mexico, with characters still living in my imagination. Well written, truly engaging, story, enough. Recommended. My thanks to the author, Elizabeth Gonzalez James, and the publisher Simon & Schuster, for my ARC of this book. #Goodreads giveaway.
Next up is the Paris novel. Here's what Stacy B had to say. Her comment got 169 likes, 5.0. Love this book and the premise of the story. In a meeting with Stella's mother's estate lawyer, she is handed a very short note written in her mother's script that states, "Go to Paris." The lawyer explains to her there is enough money to last a little while, but Stella needs to be a little frugal. Stella's thinking out loud, why Paris? Love Reichel's stellar job at developing each and every character as well as including current topics. Who is Jules? He gave me quite an education. Love the Dior dress. Love the art, the museums, the wine, the food and styles of chefs. Love all the experiences including outdoor markets, alleys, and side streets tourists would never think to go. Love that Stella and Jules could drink so much fine and rare wine with lunch and dinner without having the repercussions I would have. Love watching Stella's reactions tasting Parisian specialties for the first time. The food is amazing. Love the bookstore, Shakespeare and Company. Love getting to know the tumbleweeds. Love the hunts. More so, I am grateful to Ruth Reichel for taking me on a spectacular journey that is close to the extreme of envy. For me, the ability to spend a year plus to live as a local in Paris would be the best. Reichel did her job. Shakespeare and Company is a real bookstore. It's pretty famous and still operating. I was fortunate to have been there 3 times. Too many tourists. George's bookstore quickly became a center for Anglophone literary life in Paris. James Baldwin, William Burroughs, Anais Nin, Allen Ginsberg, Richard Wright, Julio Cortázar, and Henry Miller were early visitors and went there to read their work to invited guests. The author's notes explain a bit of the fiction.
We now turn to the storm we made. Liz, whose comment garnered 241 likes, shared the following opinion. The storm we made fulfills my demands for historical fiction, to teach me something new without sacrificing a good story. I was unaware of how World War II played out in Malaya, now Malaysia. Malaya had been ruled by the British for 100 years before the Japanese invaded in 1941. Promising an Asia for Asians, they actually were worse than the British, taking young men as slave labor, killing civilians indiscriminately. The story alternates between 1935 moving forward and 1945. The earlier sections are told only from Cecily's POV. She's Eurasian, a wife and mother, and she willingly becomes a spy for the Japanese. Unlike her obsequious husband, she hated the way the British looked down their noses at the locals. And she's also in love with the mysterious Fujiwara, and it's this love more than anything that guides her choices. The latter sections also cover her 3 children, her daughter who works in a tea house, her teenage son who is captured and ends up in a slave labor camp, and her youngest, whom they are attempting to hide so she doesn't become a comfort girl. Obviously, things didn't turn out the way Cecile expected. The latter sections deal with what it takes to survive, even as the war is turning against the Japanese. It encompasses different types of strength. The ending was so poignant, as the innocent are the ones that pay the price. The characters here are fully fleshed out. Cecile wasn't an easy character to like, but she was an interesting one, with her feelings of guilt and betrayal. My thanks to Nettigalli and Simon & Schuster for an advance copy of this book.
Time for There Are Rivers in the Sky. Let's see why Jessica's comment, with 442 likes, stood out. An utterly transportive story. ES has a wonderful skill of telling stories through the lens of the most unassuming of things, either a tree or in this case water, and weaving a beautiful tapestry of life that makes the reader also feel connected. What I would give to have been able to read this back when I was living in London. I would have immediately gone to the British Museum and marveled at all of the things I had no idea existed. But now, after reading this book, feel very special to me. I have quite an obsessive personality, so I definitely feel an ancient Mesopotamia phase starting because of this book.
Alright, let's check out Long Island. Here's what Kim Wagner said. Her comment got 692 likes. What a disappointment. The Kirkus-starred review describes a dramatic denouement, with a plot twist worthy of Edith Wharton. To me it felt like the last page of the book must be missing, or that the author, unsure how to end the book, simply decided not to.
Let's take a look at Behind Every Good Man. Chantel's comment, which got 172 likes, might give us a clue why it stood out. This book is an absolute treasure. Seriously, I couldn't stop smiling, then feeling all the emotions, then smiling and giggling again. Beverly comes in and totally takes charge, turning this story into something truly special. And let's not forget about the mum. Her dry, quirky humor adds that perfect touch of lightness to everything. The story really gets how a woman's mind works, and shows that you can accomplish anything if you set your mind to it. Trust me, you've got to read it to really appreciate it.
Next up is Husbands and Lovers. Here's what Niloufar Osmekik had to say. Her comment got 315 likes. I was blown away as soon as I got my hands on this highly anticipated historical fiction romance meets women's fiction by Beatrice Williams. Who am I kidding? Every time she releases a new book, I dance with joy and make sure to carve out enough time to immerse myself fully in the remarkable journeys with her memorable characters until my eyes can't stay open. I have a rule to finish her books in one sitting, but due to the length of the text, sometimes it becomes more challenging than I can endure. Anyway, if you ask me if I enjoyed this ride, I can enthusiastically scream yes, especially because the parts featuring Mallory resonated with me so intensely. I loved her character development, her endurance, tough, witty demeanor, her connection and devotion to her son Sam, and when I read about her past, uncovering the big mystery that forces her to keep secrets, I loved her even more. Her unfinished love story with Monk broke my heart. Now let's talk more about the plot. There are actually three timelines, and even though they center on Mallory Dunn and Hannah Ainsworth's narratives, we also get limited perspectives from their lovers' voices, which piqued my interest because I enjoyed seeing how these incredible women changed the course of the men's lives and made them simmer in love. The story begins in New England in 2022, where Mallory Dunn, a single mum barely making ends meet to take care of her 10-year-old son Sam, receives terrible news that pushes her to drive 3 hours to the hospital where Sam has been airlifted after being poisoned by toxic mushrooms at his summer camp. His condition requires a kidney transplant, and unfortunately, both Mallory and her sister Paige are not suitable donors. Their estranged father is not an option she wants to consider, and of course she has no intention of asking the father of her child, the famous songwriter Monk Adams, whom she hasn't seen since 2008 due to tragic events that separated them. Unfortunately, Monk is about to marry a famous influencer, so there's no way she can face him, even for the sake of their child he never met. But there's one more lead that Mallory can follow. She discovers her mother was adopted, which means there might be relatives she never met who could help her as potential donors, leading her story to intersect with another timeline, Cairo, 1951. In Cairo, we're introduced to Hannah Ainsworth, a Hungarian refugee still suffering from the aftereffects of the tragedy she endured during the war, married to a respectable British diplomat. Her husband's health condition leads him to an office job in Cairo, where Hannah is bitten by a snake and saved by the charismatic hotel manager Lucien Beck. This encounter changes her life forever, as a passionate forbidden relationship puts Hannah between two men and forces her to make a decision between two different life paths. As soon as she discovers she's expecting, the choice she has to make becomes even more imminent and crucial. Overall, I love both timelines and the well-developed characterization, but you may guess I rooted for Mallory and Monk's story that takes place between 2008 and 2022, as it engaged me a little more. Take your napkins with you when you start reading this book to savor the emotional ride fully. Definitely one of the best historical fiction and women's fiction of the year that you shouldn't miss. It highly deserved my shiny 5 stars. Many thanks to NetGalley and Random House Publishing Group for sharing this remarkable book's digital reviewer copy with me in exchange for my honest opinions. Follow me on medium.com to read my articles about books, movies, streaming series, astrology.
All right, let's check out Anita DeMonte Laughs Last. Here's what Rachel said. Her comment got 634 likes. Writing-wise, this book deserves a much higher rating than I gave it. Don't get me wrong. Conversations on institutionalized racism, misogyny, and the detriment of stereotypes need to be discussed, just not at the expense of a real person, against a family's wishes. Let me make this clear. Anita DeMonte of Anita DeMonte Laughs Last is actually a real-life artist, Ana Mendieta, who, coincidentally, is not named in this book. Not in the dedication. Not in the foreword. Not even in the acknowledgments. Olifria. This is truly ironic considering that a large portion of Dieta is the concept of Anita's legacy and intellectual property. There are even multiple conversations that are meant to examine how marginalized groups/Latina women are erased from the art world, all while effectively doing the same to Anna's legacy. Throw in the them of how wrong it is that Anita's legacy is being controlled by people who are not her family and don't have her best interests at heart. Before reading this, I would encourage everyone to read this, which is not so coincidentally titled Ba-Ah. And, in the case that you don't want to read it/can't get past the paywall, here are the highlights. Anna's niece was quoted saying that her family thought the likeness between Anna and Anita was so profound that they were. The marketing materials portray Anna/Anita as being forgotten. Although there is a lot I could say about the book itself, I want to use this space instead to highlight some pieces of Ana Mendieta's legacy, since Xochitl Gonzalez couldn't be bothered to do it herself. Newer additions to this book now have a dedication to Ana Mendieta. Yay for acknowledgement, but I do think the Mendieta family's argument/overall narrative still stands.
Let's move forward with The Seventh Veil of Salome. Niloufer Osmekik's review attracted 231 likes. Here's what she wrote. Well, this book is unquestionably a different work of art. Rather than drawing readers into another supernatural horror story, Silvia Moreno Garcia takes on the infamous Salome, briefly mentioned in 2 Gospels of the New Testament. She weaves her narrative into the 50s Hollywood entertainment circle, where politics, gossip, racism, and scheming dominate the scene, mirroring today's film industry dynamics, where diversity is gradually changing the landscape, but white privilege still holds sway, and women are scrutinized for their personal lives in the name of open social media policies. The storytelling unfolds in a half-documentary style with multiple narrations, intertwining Salome's story, a topic of a movie production. She is trapped in a golden cage, entangled in a forbidden love affair with a young preacher, compelled to make choices that could elevate her in the political arena, but might also condemn her to bear permanent bloodstains on her hands. As we delve into Salome's story, we are introduced to young Vera Larios, an unknown Mexican ingenue, who surprisingly lands the role of Salome, despite her limited acting experience. Quickly, she finds herself entangled in the gossip mill, criticized for rejecting unwarranted advances. We witness her transformation from a meek, obedient girl, overshadowed by her more beautiful and talented sister, to a feisty, tough, self-resilient individual as she connects with the true essence of Salome. Another key character is Nancy Hartley, an impulsive, wild, and ambitious individual playing games to secure her place in Hollywood. She refuses to accept that the role she's dreamed of could go to an untalented Mexican girl. As Vera becomes a threat, Nancy embarks on a journey to secure her dream job, pushing the limits of what she is willing to do. I was thoroughly hooked and enjoyed the completely different stories of these 3 women. I appreciated how Salome's story reflected in both Vera and Nancy, compelling them to make bold decisions by engaging with her cunning, smart, and deceitful femme fatale attributes. This book is a brilliant blend of women's fiction and historical fiction, offering a realistic portrait of 50s Hollywood. Silvia Moreno Garcia's remarkable research skills shine through, providing enlightening information about that era and offering insights into the early mechanisms of La La Land. The incorporation of film noir and thriller elements keeps you on your toes, with a forewarning that something tragic will unfold at the end to parallel Salome's shocking story. The ending was executed with finesse, mirroring the excellence seen throughout the entire development. The characterization was marvelous, with Moreno Garcia crafting flawlessly layered characters that readers can easily relate to. Without a doubt, this book earns my 5 blazing La La Land stars. I wholeheartedly recommend this brilliant, whirlwind, and perfectly crafted concept. Many thanks to NetGalley and Random House Publishing Group /Del Rey for generously providing me with a digital reviewer copy of this amazing book in exchange for my honest opinions. Follow me on Medium.com to read my articles about books, movies, streaming series, astrology.
What did readers really think about By Any Other Name? Shelley's book Nook's comment, liked by over 508 people, might give us a clue. I always find 3-star reads hard to review. The rating of this one isn't a reflection of the author's talent or writing capabilities. Many of Jodi Picoult's books have been 5-star reads for me. This is more about my personal preference and enjoyment of the book rather than the author's writing style. Poetry and Shakespeare are just not for me. I love the idea of the book about 2 women, who are playwrights, one in 1581, Amelia, who is the true author of William Shakespeare's plays, and the other, Melina, is in the present and she's the ancestor of Amelia. The 2 timeline narratives worked well for me, and Jodi Picoult is the consummate storyteller as always, but this is a very long book at over 500 pages and I found my attention waning throughout. The majority of the book is in the earlier timeline and I think that is why it didn't work for me. I'm not a big fan of Shakespeare, but as always Picoult did a marvelous job with her research. It was simply incredible, and 500 years later women are still struggling in the male-dominated world of publishing. Picoult deserves 3 stars for her writing ability and research alone. Where she lost me was the drag it was to read so much about the Shakespeare writing controversy. Its long chapters slowed the pace so much. But I will always love her for her bravery in taking on tough topics, of which she gets plenty of hate mail and pushback. Ms. Picoult, don't ever stop. Thank you to NetGalley and the publisher for the advance reader's copy.
All right, let's check out James. Here's what Jamie said. Her comment got 1738 likes. Whoa, that was so not what I was expecting. Despite the Goodreads blurb that calls this book ferociously funny and brimming with electrifying humor, I didn't really find much to laugh about while reading it. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I was just surprised by how serious and thought-provoking this novel ended up being. I mean, sure, there are a few funny bits here and there, but I definitely wouldn't consider this to be a humorous book overall. But, with that said, is a brilliant piece of fiction, and I have once again been wowed by Percival Everett's talent. As an aside, if you want to read a truly funny book by Everett, grab yourself a copy of Jessica. It's amazing. Everett manages to stay true to the tone and style of Shawnee, while at the same time creating something completely different with runaway slave Jim as the narrator. This is not an easy book to read, well, subject-wise anyway. Lots of terrible things happen to good people, mostly just because of the color of their skin. There are awful characters who degrade and take advantage of Jim just because they can. There is murder and rape and violence and death. I've read books about slavery before, but somehow this one brought home the inhumanity of it like no other. I foresee lots of challenges to this book by the slavery wasn't really all that bad, red hat wearing, book burning crowd. I flew through this book and found it basically unputdownable. I read the first 80% in one sitting, forced myself to go to bed around 3 a.m., and then finished the last bit first thing the next morning. It's exciting and suspenseful and heart-wrenching all at the same time, and the ending was fantastic. If you enjoyed the original, you'll probably love this version at least as much, if not more. Percival Everett is an incredibly talented author and a national treasure, and this latest book of his deserves all of the praise and recognition that will undoubtedly come its way. Many thanks to NetGalley and Doubleday for providing me with an advance copy of this book to review.
What did readers really think about the Lion Women of Tehran? Sujoya, the Overbooked Bibliophiles comment, liked by over 263 people, might give us a clue. 4.5 star by was one of my most anticipated reads of 2024, and I'm glad to say that I was not disappointed. Written in beautiful prose, this evocative story spans the 1950s through the 70s and 80s to the present day and follows Elahe, Ellie, Soltani and Homer Rusbeh, girls from completely different backgrounds who meet in Tehran as 7-year-olds who become fast friends but drift apart, a cycle that continues as their lives intersect time and time again and their fates intertwine against the volatile backdrop of the Iranian Revolution and the decades that follow. The author addresses several important themes, including social class, feminism, women's rights and political activism, and the immigrant experience, while also giving us a glimpse into Iranian life and culture. The story is set in Tehran for most of the 50s and 60s, and both the United States and Tehran for the remainder of the novel. The narrative is presented predominantly from Ellie's perspective, though we do get a few segments from Homer's perspective. Both main characters are well fleshed out and their dynamic as it evolves over decades is realistically depicted, but I wish we could have explored a few of the crucial secondary characters in more depth. I also wish Homer's perspective had been in more detail and that her story had been told with less telling and more showing, particularly toward the end of the novel. The themes in Marjan Kamali's latest novel are realistic, relatable and most importantly, timely and relevant. The author's portrayal of the changing socio-political landscape of Iran during the Iranian Revolution and its aftermath with emphasis on women's rights will inspire reflection. We can't help but ponder over the fact that many of us have been afforded freedoms that others do not enjoy, freedoms that we often take for granted and rights that women all over the world have fought for in their own time and continue to do so today. Overall, I found this to be an immersive and thought-provoking story about friendship, courage, healing, empathy and acceptance, forgiveness and redemption, with characters who will stay with you long after you have turned the last page. I paired my reading with the audiobook brilliantly narrated by and. I couldn't agree more. What could be more important to a woman than her right to choose? Pencil, pencil, pencil.
Time for the frozen river. Let's see why Deborah's comment, with 1025 likes, stood out, is an example of historical fiction at its finest. I love books that not only educate me, but evoke emotion and are thought-provoking. This book did all three perfectly. Deborah was inspired by Martha Ballard, February 9, 1735 to June 9, 1812.
a midwife who delivered hundreds of babies and kept diaries about her personal life as well as her experiences as a midwife. Her diaries have proven to be educational and provided insight into the lives of women during her time/life. I loved how the author blended fact and fiction to bring this book to life. I loved this gripping and hard-to-put-down historical mystery that had me turning the pages and wanting to know who done it. After successfully delivering a baby, Martha Ballard is summoned to examine the body of a man who has been found in the frozen Kennebec River. She makes her observations and determines that the man has been murdered. Martha's husband taught her to read and write, and she maintains a diary where she keeps track of births, deaths, when she has provided healing and aspects of her personal life. She notes what she has observed when examining the dead man's body. The dead man just happens to be one of the men who has been accused of raping a woman several months earlier. When a trial date for the rape is set, Martha will be called as a witness, and her diary will be shown as evidence. Over the course of the winter, Martha will deliver many babies and come up against Dr. Benjamin Page, a Harvard-educated doctor, who not only disagrees with her pertaining to how the man found in the river died, but also disagrees with her when it comes to childbirth. Man, did he agitate me, as he did Martha in the story. There was a lot of booing and hissing from me during his scenes. I was completely and blissfully hooked from the very first page. I admired Martha's courage, her gumption, her intellect, her straightforward approach, her advocating for women and her healing knowledge. She lived in a time where many women could not read or write. As a midwife, she could testify in court for certain things, but for the rape trial could only testify if her husband was present. This book also highlighted how women were treated during this time. Women could be tried for having a child out of wedlock due to fornicating, but the men involved walked around with their reputation intact. After all, it's her fault he got under her skirts. Grr. I couldn't help but feel for the women of this book. Pre-chalk. I was invested in the mystery as to how the man got into the river, just as much as I was invested in Martha's life. I was happy she had a loving marriage with a man who respected not only her but her skills and always had her back. There were many characters in this book, each is distinct, and played a part. As with most books, there were characters I loved, those I liked, and there were characters that I loathed. I loved the vivid descriptions, the chilling atmosphere, and the tension in this wonderful book. I could tell that the author did a tremendous amount of research prior to writing. Lowcoke. I was glued to the pages of this beautifully written book. I love how Martha was assertive, outspoken, confident, and a champion for women in a time when women were not considered equal. The author's note at the end is also a must-read section of the book. Hashtag the frozen river, hashtag NetGalley, hashtag Ariel Lawhon, hashtag Doubleday Books. Thank you to Doubleday Books and NetGalley, who provided me with a copy of this book in exchange for an honest review. All the thoughts and opinions are my own. Read more of my reviews at
Alright, let's check out the book lovers library. Here's what Tracy said. Her comment got 72 likes. This is an entertaining, well-written, World War II historical fiction novel. It depicts the beautiful bond between a mother and daughter, and has endearing characters, friendship, a little mystery, a touch of romance, and a gratifying conclusion. Ms. Martin's loyal readers will appreciate the nod to one of her previous books. I listened to the audiobook, and the narrator, Ms. Saskia Malveld, who has a captivating voice, does an outstanding job depicting the characters and their personalities. The author's note is interesting and informative, and is truly appreciated.
Our next book is ABP. Canadian Jen, whose comment was liked by 185 readers, had this to say: I love stories that take me to foreign countries, where I'm able to become immersed in different cultures. Panama is one such country. The history of the canal is fascinating. How America stormed in and offered Colombia $dollar to give Panama its independence. It wasn't a selfless gesture, however. America wanted a canal for their own economic needs. This is a story of those who came to help build, resist the build, and those to reclaim what was rightfully theirs. There are those who traveled from across the country, and from across the sea. As much as I loved the intent of this story and the characters, it fell short for me. Henriquez created such marvelous characters, yet she failed on developing any of them through. We have a young Ada, who traveled from Barbados to get a job to pay for her sister's surgery. Omar, who was looking more from his life, takes a job working in the canal that mutes his father speechless as he is shamed by it. Valentina, ready to lead the town to protest the dam required for the canal, and so many other fascinating characters. The story did merge beautifully, yet I was still left wanting. More of some characters, less of others. More of the impacts of the canal. Overall, a solid 4-star.
Here comes Shelterwood, and guess what? Kelly Kellever Reid's hot take scored 166 likes. Let's read it. 3-star. This is a hard review to write. Lisa Wingate is a phenomenal author, and Before We Were Yours has a special place in my heart. I was cautiously optimistic about Shelterwood, because I know Wingate's stories have the potential to rip your heart into a million pieces. Sadly, this one didn't work for me. The writing is strong and the research was clearly thorough. I just struggled with the pacing. A lot of the book felt like a slog, and then an important detail was kind of glossed over or retold in a way that didn't make sense to me. I'd be waiting for a certain piece of information to drop, or for someone to realize something kind of crucial, and all of a sudden the character would tell you that conversation happened, and now a day had gone by. I usually love dual POV, but the back and forth between timelines here was jarring for me. I would be really invested in the past storyline, and then have to get totally reacquainted with what was going on when things switched back to the chapters set in the 90s. Overall, this was an interesting and eye-opening plot, but it was too slow for me. I was invested enough in the characters and the mystery to finish, but it was a bit of a struggle to get to the end. Thank you to the publisher for allowing me to be an early reader. All opinions are my own.
Next up, The Briar Club. Niloufar Ozmekik dropped a comment that 655 people couldn't help but like. Let's see what she said. As a devoted fan of Kate Quinn's historical fiction novels, I happily delve into them without concern for their length. Once I immerse myself in one of her works, I find myself captivated by her stories and deeply engaged with her characters, just as I did with her latest offering. The opening was intriguing. The story begins in 1954, in Washington, D.C., at a woman's boarding house called Briarwood House on Thanksgiving Day, where a brutal murder occurs. One of the boarders may be the culprit, but the identity of the victim remains unknown, although we learn that the murder took place in the room of a boarder named Grace March. We then quickly jump back 4 years earlier to follow 13-year-old Pete, who shoulders more responsibilities at a young age to help his mother as a handyman at the boarding house. He takes care of his sister, who suffers from lazy eye and a learning disorder. Through his perspective, we are introduced to the boarders, including Grace March, who moves into the attic's shoebox room. Grace is a mysterious widow, tight-lipped about her past, who easily befriends the other boarders. The beautiful young mother Fliss, whose doctor husband works in San Diego as the approaching Korean War affects the political climate. Nora, the youngest of them at only 20, who works for the National Archives and is having a love affair with a gangster despite being the daughter of a police officer. Beatrice, an ex-baseball player whose career was cut short by World War II and her injuries. Reka, an elderly Hungarian immigrant. And Arlene, a secretary for HUAC, House Un-American Activities Committee, who becomes a devoted supporter of McCarthy's Red Scare. These women, each from different backgrounds and dealing with their own demons and regrets, gather around Grace's attic room to heal their emotional scars with the sweet taste of Grace's special sun tea, sharing their love, hate, and miseries under the tight bond of friendship. But Grace's secrets threaten the sacred bond they've built, and unexpected violent tragedies may tear their lives apart. In the end, each of them must make a choice to differentiate between who is their real friend and who is the enemy hiding among them. Overall, the characterization in this book is remarkable. You can easily connect with each of the women, embracing them with their flaws and mistakes without judgment. Though it may seem like a long journey, you never want it to end because the pacing is incredibly balanced, including the heart-throbbing action parts. Nothing feels rushed or overly repetitive or dragging. The trajectory of events is executed perfectly, and the conclusion is also very satisfying. This is definitely one of my favorite historical fiction reads of the year, and I highly recommend it. Many thanks to NetGalley and William Morrow for providing me with this remarkable book's digital review copy in exchange for my honest thoughts.